Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Dear Rach and Soph. I'm Rachael Johns and I'm with Sophie Green. How are you today, Sophie?
I'm very well, Rachel, and as ever, pleased to see you. Another resplendent t-shirt.
I was thinking the same about your beautiful shirt, or I think you told me earlier it was a dress
It is a
actually.
dress. I've had a very, very long day and I needed a shower. It was that kind of sloughing off the day thing. It's like I just need to throw something on to come on here and record. So it's a Romance Was Born dress. As I've mentioned before, I wear a lot of Romance Was Born.
It's
It's on the
gorgeous.
same label. And this was a collaboration with Disney, actually. So it's a Cinderella dress.
Oh, wow. Oh,
Yeah.
we'll have to get you to stand up and do a twirl.
I don't know that there's room where I'm.
Okay, but I suppose not everyone is watching us on YouTube. Some people are listening on podcasts, so they might not be able to see. But take my word for it that Sophie looks glamorous as usual, even though she's been traveling all day and then traveling in the morning and then gone to your day job. So tell us what you've been up to in the last week or so and how the work's going with writing, editing, everything. What's going on with you?
Well, the most significant thing writing-wise that's happened in the past week is that I was sent the structural report for next year's novel, and I'm not calling I was calling it because that's another thing.
Hang on, I need to ask you, when you opened it, did you need chocolate or wine?
I did not, and there was no Panadol taken, and there were no tears because I had asked questions when I sent the manuscript in. So I had set up my own expectations about feedback.
Yeah.
And I think that really helped. And so they have the report. I have not had time to actually start working on things, which is pretty much par for the course because I do like it to sit in my brain and marinate. But it's achievable. It's all achievable, and I just need some time to make a plan. So as with writing the manuscripts, with rewriting, I tend to make a plan. So I will sit down, make a list of everything I need to do.
I do that too.
Then I will go to the grid that holds the plot and make a new version of it. And because I do version control on things, so change the file name, and then I will start populating that with the things I need to do. And I color code those so I know that. Like,
oh my gosh,
yeah,
you're so much more organized than me. Like I do also write a plan when I get my structural edit in, but what I do usually is I do all the easy stuff quickly first, but I do write a long list sort of what I need to change, whether, and then I kind of work out an order of how I'm going to do that. And yeah, but it's not colorful and it's not on a spreadsheet. It's just on a piece of paper in my notebook.
I use paper too. That paper's my first phase.
Yeah,
I think that really helps to organize the thoughts, and you probably do as well, because there's something about the handwriting nature of it.
And do you print out the report?
I've got to say no, because I haven't for a while. I used to.
I print it out and then I highlight and make notes on there myself, and then I write up sort of a format of what I'm going to address first and how I'm going to go through it. And I love it when I can then tick it off the list.
So I didn't with the last one because it was a change of editor, and actually, and what she said, the editor is Nicola O'Shea, and what Nicola has done at this time, as she did last time, is actually transpose the action items, for lack of a better term, into the manuscript itself. So the previous editor, there weren't notes in the manuscript corresponding to the report. So I would print out the report so I could essentially put numbers against things and then make a list from that. But with Nicola's reports, so I get the report, and then in the manuscript she has dropped in comments that correspond to what she said. So I didn't need that written report last time. Sorry, printed report.
And so I think you mentioned something about titles before we started. Are you able to share this title?
Well, hot off the press right before we started recording is that my publisher Rebecca sent an email because we had been talking about changing the title. Pursuant to something.
Can you tell us what the title? What was your working title?
The title was actually the title of the contract, and it's Monday Mornings at the Summertime Salon. So this novel is set on the Central Coast in the mid-80s. So the salon refers to the hairdressing salon. That
sounds so fun.
Action. But the Monday mornings element I love because of alliteration, because I'm a big fan of it. However, when it came to writing it, it was a little more restrictive a device than I had planned on.
You mean like having it occur on Monday mornings?
Well, and just having something recurring on Monday mornings, and Nicola had pointed that out. But I'd also said when I sent in the manuscripts, one of the questions I'd asked was, is this working? Like, is the Monday morning thing working? So I wasn't surprised when she wrote back and said, either I need to make more of it or think about changing it. So Rebecca had a couple of different title suggestions for me. Now, she queried her colleagues and almost half and half, but with a preponderance towards
we might have to ask our listeners then.
So, and she did say to me, so just the email I received just before we started recording was perhaps you'd like to put it out to social media, but hey,
let's put it out to our listeners. So what are the alternatives? So we're scrapping Monday mornings?
We're scrapping Monday mornings, but Rachel, I'm going to say you're taking responsibility for this because it was your idea to talk about it on the podcast.
Yeah, totally. I don't mind if hashtag comes for me. Okay, so we're scrapping Monday mornings at the summertime
salon. Yeah, we're keeping.
What are our options?
One of the options keeps summertime salon, and it would be.
I like summertime salon.
Lessons in Love at the summertime salon.
Lessons in Love at the. It's a long title, isn't it?
I do like a long title on my books.
I don't mind it. Anyway, I think the longest title I've ever had is How to Mend a Broken Heart. Anyway, what's the second one?
Second one is The Little Salon by the Sea.
So we've got The Little Salon by the Sea and Love Lessons at the Summertime.
Lessons in Love at the Summertime. Oh, it could be Love Lessons. That's another thing should it be Love Lessons? And I should say with this novel, there are 4 love stories in it. So
I think I'm going for Love Lessons. The Salon by the Sea. Well, I suppose half the problem is you have written the book. Mm-hmm. Rebecca has read it, and I'm guessing probably now some other people have read it, maybe too.
Only 2 editors.
Okay. They would have more of an idea. For me, like Love Lessons or Lessons in Love at the Summertime Salon gives us more of an idea about what the story might be about. Whereas, what was it? The Little Salon by the Sea.
The Little Salon by the Sea, yeah.
Sounds cutesy, but I mean, personally, I prefer the first one, I think. But that's let's see what the readers think. Do you have a preference, Sophie?
Oh, I was originally going for The Little Salon by the Sea, but again, as you said, I wrote it, so I am not the best arbiter. And
no, I think you are, because you know the tone of the book. You know, like whereas I'm literally going on what I've heard you talk about. I haven't read the book.
And what was I going to say? It's completely gone out. I'm a little bit tired at the time we're speaking.
Yeah, no, poor Sophie's been traveling and then at work.
Look, I think either work. Oh, that's what I was going to say. All my book titles are long, so that's an element as well, and they're long because publisher has always wanted them long.
I love them. I mean, what was the first one?
The inaugural meeting of the Fairvale Ladies Book Club.
I do love that. So I think, Love Lessons at the Summertime Salon, it seems to fit in more with your other books as well.
And look, I do, as I said, I love
we've got, what? Sorry?
I love alliteration. So Summertime Salon, having that to me, but I also prefer to let it go.
Everyone, you need to comment somewhere. Email Sophie, comment on our posts, whatever. Let us know what your favourite idea is and a favourite title. Anything else you've got to share with us? Exciting things are going on?
I don't think so. It feels like accelerating towards the end of the year rather than slowing down. And I will be rewriting my novel over the break. So my day job, the office will shut down between Christmas and New Year. And my next draft is due in mid-January. And so I will be writing.
Don't worry. I too will be writing over the summer. I think I might give myself Christmas Eve and Christmas Day off. But I'm feeling a little stressy. I had a panic attack with Sophie in messages yesterday or something. I was like, I'm feeling stressed. I don't know if I'll manage to do the book. And what did you say to me? You had some good advice.
I think I just said you prefer rewriting to writing.
Which I don't even know that's true. I must have said that at some random. I don't think
I said it on the podcast, Rachel. We haven't recorded.
I like whatever I'm not doing.
Okay.
And I think the thing is, what I like about rewriting is you've already finished the draft. You know you actually managed to get a story done. Whereas when you're writing a first draft, like I've got that whole panic. Well, I'm
going to read out what I wrote to you.
Okay.
So I said,
it might help other people.
You will make it. Just get something down. Remember, you prefer rewriting to writing. So this draft just needs to be as much of the story as you need to get to the next stage and no more.
And again, I think that's totally true. My panic is also always that I'm on this 2-book-a-year contract at the moment, which seems insane. But I also believe in quality over quantity, and I will push back if need be on those deadlines. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. Today, I think this is going to be quite a fun little chat because I think a few weeks ago you said to me, shall we read the Booker Prize winning novel?
Mm-hmm.
To see, well, what did you say? Why did you suggest it?
I think it was probably just, I think probably because I worked out it was short.
Yeah.
Maybe
I'm
you
actually
could
looking at
put
the
it
word
in.
length now. It is very short. I've got it here. It's
Yeah.
just, I remember, it's only 45,000 words.
Oh, I should say for those who are listening, it is Orbital by Samantha Harvey.
Oh, yes. Sorry. Orbital by Samantha Harvey, which she won about a month ago now, I think. And when Sophie said she was, we should do it, I went to my local Dimmicks because it said online that they had a copy. My son works at QBD, said they didn't have a copy. So instead of asking him to get it, I went to my local Dimmicks and it said there was one copy. So I was looking around trying to find it. I could not find it anywhere. And then I went and asked the desk and they looked it up. And it must have been the day or so after the Booker Prize had been announced. And she said, oh, no, we do have one. We actually sold 2 more this morning. It's in fantasy and sci-fi, which I was looking for it in general fiction. So
as you should have. It should not be shelved in sci-fi. Yeah, it should not be shelved in sci-fi.
So I don't know if it's just that Dimmicks or Dimmicks overall. But anyway, I was looking and I almost didn't see it because it was so short. I mean, so tiny that I like, hang on. Here's a book I've got on my bookshelf now. That is like the kind I was looking for the normal size. I'm showing people who listen to the podcast.
So those of you who are listening, not watching, Orbital is actually in a B format now. I don't know if it was ever in a C format, but it's a B format and it is very slender.
So tiny. Anyway, so Sophie suggested we read it to see what all the fuss was about. And I must admit should I read the blurb quickly? Just so anyone, yeah. Okay, so Orbital by Samantha Harvey. So we're going to have a bit of a book club, I guess, today, folks.
Yeah, it was completely not planned part of this podcast, but we decided that we would fit in one more before our ultimate episode, which is with our lovely writing Rachael Treasure. So that will be the last episode for the year. We decided we would fit another one in, and this just presented itself as an option.
So I'm going to read the blurb and then tell you why I was hesitant about reading it until Sophie said we should read it. So, Orbital by Samantha Harvey. Life on our planet as you've never seen it before. 6 astronauts rotate in their spacecraft above the Earth. They are there to collect meteorological data and conduct scientific experiments, but mostly they observe. Together they watch our silent blue planet, endless shows of spectacular beauty witnessed in a single day. Yet, although separated from the world, they cannot escape its constant pull. News reaches them of the death of a mother, and with it comes thoughts of returning home. The fragility of human life fills their conversations, their fears, their dreams. So far from Earth, they have never felt more part or protective of it. They begin to ask, what is life without Earth? What is Earth without humanity? Now, when I think I must have first heard about this novel when the long list or the short list was announced for the Booker Prize. And I have a bit of I was going to say love-hate relationship with prize winners, especially the Pulitzer and the Booker, but it's probably not a love-hate relationship. The majority of prize, like Booker or Pulitzer Prize, I will say, and probably if I'm honest, I shouldn't say on this podcast, the Stella Prize, things like that.
Rachel, you can say whatever, this is partly what I hate about the whole cancel culture thing is that you feel that you can't say that. Right?
Yeah, that's true. Like, because I feel okay speaking about this book because the Booker Prize is a sort of global, it's a global competition, and I've never met Samantha Harvey. I probably never will. I don't have anyone who knows her, whereas the Stella Prize is Australian competition. Yeah. And I do know people who have been nominated for the Stella, people who I love, people who've won the Stella, people who I've got along with really well. But I think the reason I'm a bit iffy is, so I've got a face-to-face book club as well as the Rachael Johns online book club, which probably many listeners have heard about. And we meet once a month, although I haven't been this year because they live in the Wheat Belt, which is an hour and a half away from me, and life's just been crazy busy.
Yeah, you've had a bit on this year, yeah.
But I try and go back. And we made a rule, like, so we've been going for about, I think, 8 years now. And the first couple of years, many of us chose like books that were long listed or winners of, you know, serious important literary prizes. And nobody liked them. The majority of people were like, most of us were bored to tears, or either bored to tears or didn't understand it, to be honest. And then you feel dumb, and you're thinking, oh, are the people that like.
And that should never happen with a book.
Interesting. Yeah, elaborate on that. What do you think? Yeah.
Well, because what are stories if not communication with other people? And if you're not communicating in a way that people can receive it and understand it, has the story succeeded? And that doesn't
these are not dumb women. Like, they're all, you know, people who you know, have careers and read lots of books and do various different things and have, you know, like have businesses and raise families or different, like, you know, they're not stupid, but all of us sometimes were like, huh?
And I actually don't think a book should ever make anyone feel stupid. And so obviously we have different levels of intelligence, we have different levels of reading interest and experience and all sorts of things, and reading fluency, and that's partly about whether you're in the habit of reading or not at any point in time. But no book should ever make anyone feel stupid, because I tend to think if a book makes you feel stupid, it's set out to make readers feel stupid, and that's
really interesting,
really rude.
Yeah. So that's why, like, I'm a little bit hesitant sometimes when, like, I find often, I think it was, now I didn't actually finish this book, so I don't know if you've read it, The Luminaries, which was a prize. So I'm not giving any like judgment on this, because I think I bought it and never actually read past a chapter or two because I had little kids at the time.
And I think other people also reported that as why I didn't read it.
It was just ridiculously long.
Eleanor Catton was the author.
Yeah, that's right. And I remember whatever the blurb was, I remember reading the blurb, and I find this often with, like, mostly Booker and Pulitzer, I think. I find the blurbs sound really interesting, and I'm like, oh, that's a really good premise or a really, like, interesting thing to explore, and I would love to read that. And then I get the book and I'm severely disappointed. So before we go into this, what's your sort of, do you read a lot of Booker, Pulitzer Prize books? Do you love any?
Look, no, and in fact, people I know who read the most tend to steer clear of them. Like, it's almost like they're.
What do you mean?
As in, they will not. If something's won the Booker Prize, they will walk in the other direction from it. Something's won the Miles Franklin, they will.
Oh, you mean people who read a lot?
People who read a lot. Yeah, people I know who read the most, who are passionate readers, eclectic readers, will look at prize-winning books and just think that is not for me. And I think it's partly because they think that those books don't have much of a story, that they're actually being.
Well, I'm sorry, but I felt that about this. But we'll get into that.
and I don't disagree with you, but we will talk about it. So that's really interesting to me as well, that people who read the most books, buy the most books that I know, just are not interested in prize winners. So as a former bookseller, I was a bookseller at an age when I did think it was kind of impressive that something won the Booker. But
I think that's the thing. People think it's impressive, right?
Yeah, but at a certain point, I stopped being interested in them at all. And the only book I remember reading in association with the Booker was Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell, which did not win, but which was shortlisted. And the only reason I read it was that a bookseller said to me, "You're going to, like, it's amazing, you'll love it."
Did you?
And then I read the first section, and it took me forever. And by the time I got into the second section of it, I fell deeply in love with it. And then I went back to him after I'd finished it and said what had happened. And he said, "Oh yeah, I should have told you. The first section is really hard to get through, and then it's fantastic."
How long is the first section?
It's not super long, but you just don't quite understand what he's doing until you're through it.
Yeah.
Once you're through it, it turns into the most extraordinarily moving piece of work, the whole novel, really.
What do you think of that? Like, how many people are actually going to give a novelist that time? Like, especially now in this day and age.
In this day and age.
You know what I mean? Like, everyone's busy, everyone just watches bite-sized content and that. I feel like you've really only got a couple of chapters, but then I guess if you're reading a literary type fiction genre, which is what these are all, then people seem to, I don't know. I feel like people come into these books thinking I should be liking this, if not. And it's interesting, actually. I saw a it was a few years ago. I think it was Kobo. No, it can't have been Kobo because they're just mostly ebooks. But someone, might have been one of the UK papers or whatever, they ran an article about the books that were most left behind in hotels.
Oh,
And the majority of them were like these esteemed prize-winning books, because I think a lot of people buy them
yeah,
because it's like there's always hype over it. As I said, they sound good often, but also people think I should read this.
yeah. And then I tend to believe that that damages reading for those people for all sorts of books, because they think I should like this.
Mhm.
If they don't like it, they think, well, novels are just not for me.
If I can't like this prize-winning book, what else would I like? Before we go into Orbital, I have to give a shout out though. I did read this year, it was not last year's winner, and my auntie read last year's winner with a prophet song or something like that, I think it's called.
I don't even.
The book, and she was like, it's amazing, amazing. I think this is one of the reasons. So I'm holding up The Bee Sting by Paul Murray, which was shortlisted last year, and I absolutely loved this book. I loved it so much. I just actually bought a second copy because I left the first copy in the US because it was a massive, thick one. I've got the B format now, but I had the C format, the trade paperback, and I was reading it when I went to the US earlier in the year, and I thought I've either got to leave it behind because it's just a big book and I don't want to bring it back. But I desperately wanted to keep reading. I was loving it so much. So I took it there and I left it in a little library there. But now I'm like, oh, I need to, who knows if I'll ever reread it again, but I loved it that much. There's something in here that I did annoy me that also annoyed me a little bit in Orbital. But so I do occasionally love, but I feel like the difference between Orbital to me and Paul Murray's The Bee Sting is there is a story in The Bee Sting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like there was much of a story in Orbital, but you said you loved it. So do you want to tell us why?
So my experience of Orbital was actually that I listened to it.
Yeah, which can make such a difference, can't it? So you listened and I read.
Yeah, and I listened to it, and the narrator's accent was actually, and someone else I was speaking to had listened to it and had the same experience. The narrator's accent was unusual and sort of hard to get into, but then I loved it. And I then looked her up. Her name is Sara, the actor who narrated it, and she's Maltese French.
Oh, okay.
And the person I was talking to who had listened to it and didn't like the voice said, I don't know why they would have chosen her. I said, well, I think because she was actually really good at all the accents.
All the different ones, like because obviously in this book there are two Russians, if I remember correctly.
Russians, an American, a Japanese,
a British lady,
and
6 of them, isn't there? So
yeah,
is it two Americans maybe?
I think there's one American, but she had an array of accents to do, including Russian. So, yeah. And I thought she was great at them, and it was distinct enough that.
And that's interesting because I think an audiobook can really, as we said before, make or break it. And I felt one of my notes that I've written in the back is, okay, there's no plot in this book really. Mm-hmm. You know that doesn't bother me because I will often read what I thought was a quiet novel, but I heard Danielle Binks say is a plotless novel, which is really about the interiority, is that what I mean, of the characters and kind of their relationships and what's going on. But it doesn't have huge things. It's more emotional stakes than big. So I don't mind that normally. But which is interesting when you're talking about the accents and stuff, I wonder if this would make me connect more with the characters. Because what I thought about, because I knew you loved it, and I believe, actually say that when I read the first chapter a couple of weeks ago, and then I stopped because I had to read some other things. And the first chapter, I think the first 2 chapters, I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. I think I'm really going to love this book. It felt like one of those books that I've really enjoyed lately. And it's about space, which is something, fascinating and different. I actually said to my husband when I was reading this last night, I'm like, this should be interesting. It's about 6 people trapped in a space thing. It should be interesting, but I'm not interested. And I think I'm not interested because I didn't really feel like I connected with any of the characters. But I'm wondering if that's where a voice narrator can come in and really bring characters alive.
I do think that's a very interesting point. So I should say I love space things. Yeah. And there's a relationship here between Orbital and Cloud Atlas, at least for me. Okay. Cloud Atlas is a book about time, connection through time, my interpretation of it, and beyond time. And David Mitchell invented 2 dialects of English for that.
Wow.
And so just looking at the idea of time and space, and I think space as a concept is within Cloud Atlas, even though characters are not actually in space. But
Yep.
I will watch a space TV series and a space.
Oh, that's why I thought it would be
Yeah.
fascinating.
So I also, there's just something about.
And a friend of mine who's actually written some space YA books and some dinosaur. Like she actually said that she'd read. That was one of the reasons why when you said it, I hadn't actually read it yet, because I thought, like, because we've talked about, I think on the podcast before, or I've talked about it in one of my Substack things. Like, I believe it's very important to, that's probably one of the reasons I picked up Beasting, because people were talking about it and it did like do so well. Like, while I don't read every long listed, shortlisted winner of these contests, I'm aware, and I actually remember reading the blurb for Orbital and thinking, oh, that sounds really good. Like, that sounds like something I would really enjoy. And then my friend who has written in this sort of sphere and is really interested in space, she's even written a couple of like Mills and Boon romances of like NASA astronauts and stuff. She said she read it and she was bored. So then I was like, oh, there's so many books, I'll just leave it. And then you said we should read it. So that's like, I'm easily influenced. See, I was influenced by my friend, not
influenced by me.
And then I was influenced by you to read it.
Here's my contention though about what it may be about and why it actually shouldn't have had more character development, is that I think it's about Earth and it's about humanity rather than about individual humans.
Which maybe it's just like a reflection of me that I'm not interested. Like I wrote, because I think you're taking it for what it kind of is supposed to be, as you said. And I read a couple of articles and interviews with the author, and that's exactly, what she.
I was just saying, I have not read any interviews with the author, so I
did this afternoon as a little bit of, research for the pod. I also, because I thought, I wanted to see, and there's a lot of, I also read some reviews of people who loved it and those who didn't love it. And there does seem to be a very big divide on those who appreciated the sort of the way Earth was described, the way space was described, and sort of, the whole, with this tiny, what is humanity and where we've, like, all the different advances. I love like the fact that we'd keep wanting more and more. Like, we went to the moon, but now that's not enough. Now we want to go to Mars, and what's, and then how's that reflecting on certain things that are happening on Earth? Like, that was interesting. But what I wrote here was so much potential to explore the relationships rather than just wax lyrical descriptions of Earth and space. Because I was thinking, we have these 6 people who, to me, like, had some interesting things that would have been better. Or like, and it's a short novel, right? It's, did I say 45,000 words? I mean, it's basically a novella, not much longer than a novella. Like, we had Anton, who gets a lump, on his neck while he's in space, and that's like,
it's a spoiler alert for anyone who's
sorry, peoples. I mean, but is it really? Because it doesn't really matter. Nothing really happens about it. He just decides, oh, life is short. But he can't. What was interesting is, I think, the insights into life in space, or like for me, what it is sort of being an astronaut, were fascinating. The whole, like, how they sleep and how they eat and the blood tests they have to do daily and the exercise, all that sort of stuff. And the fact that he has this lump and he doesn't want to, like, tell anyone about it. He doesn't want to tell the physician or anyone who he's with, because he can't travel back by himself. So he would if they have to go back because of his lump, then 2 other people have to go too, and it kind of,
and that's the end of their time on the International Space Station. Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting, and it would have been, great to see a little bit more about his internal conflict about that, worrying about, death or life, and whether, and then he is also talking about, this makes him think about his loveless marriage. And I'm like, oh yeah, I want to know more about that. And then Chee's mum, as it says, I think, in the blurb, it does say in the blurb, so I'm not giving a spoiler away here, that Chee's mum dies while they're there. And that, to me, is such a huge thing for a loved one to die while you're in space. She can't, she wasn't there when she died. She can't be there while her family and friends are, like, grieving, and there is the discussion of the funeral and that. And I just thought all this stuff is really deep, emotional, human experience. And none of it, to me, is explored in the way it could be.
Because, and then bearing in mind, as I said, I have not read any interviews with the author, but my interpretation of it is on a metatextual level, we are orbiting in and out of these characters' lives and stories.
Yep.
They are orbiting in and out of parts of the earth. And so there's this structure of ascending orbit and descending orbit. And there's a point in there that's made that they're floating, not because there's no gravity, but because they're constantly falling. And that whole idea that any astronaut
it would be good for a year 11 and 12 English lit essay.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, like, I listened to the audiobook. I started listening to it. I was embarking on a long country drive. I was coming back from Orange in New South Wales to Sydney.
Yep.
I was weeping while I was driving.
See, that shocks me. And that's why I'm like, or maybe if I listened to the audio, I would have felt differently.
Well, maybe because the narrator gives it this pathos and this connection to human experience.
Yeah.
You've got this person telling you this story.
I feel like that would make a difference to me. Because I get what you're saying, and I completely can see all of that is, you know, I highlighted a few things into like places that I really liked. One part was literally, because I feel like they could have talked more. That's the other thing. You know, I do like dialogue. And one thing about the dialogue, what is with literary novels that don't use quotation marks? Could you explain this for me?
I can't, because
The Bee Sting by Paul Murray.
I can't, because I don't approve of that practice.
You don't approve either.
I don't.
I just feel like it's wanky. I'm sorry. I'm saying
punctuation is a courtesy to the reader, and I do believe it.
I mean, thank God there's commas and full stops and apostrophes in this book. But I just don't understand why we don't have quotation marks. Like, I don't feel like it adds anything to the book ever to take quotation.
I feel like it was kind of something that might have been taught in a university course at one time. People got pulled aside, like, hey, just as a kind of rebellion.
Because you know what? As I said, I've read The Bee Sting by Paul Murray, which I loved, and I know your mum didn't like it. I'd love you to read it to see what you think, because but it's a big book.
It is a big book.
And you've got lots to do. But the thing is about this book, there's no punctuation marks, but there's also no dialogue marks, but there's also no like the first section has no dialogue quotation marks. But then as you go further in, and it's told from the point of view of a few different characters, and one of the characters, not only is there no quotation marks, but there's no, trying to find it now I'm like, am I telling the truth or am I making this up? No, it's true. There's no like commas or full stops either. It annoyed me, but I think there's a reason for it in The Bee Sting. I don't think he needs it. I can see what he's trying to do. I feel like he's trying to, like, because it was the person who had the no punctuation whatsoever was very uneducated and had come from a different background to the person. So like, I think that was where they were trying to get that across. I don't think I needed it. And this one I don't understand, because I don't see why you need no quotation marks at all. Like, what's the point?
Yeah, and so I have my own feelings about not including punctuation when you're writing about a character who's supposedly uneducated.
That could just be, I'm trying to remember because it was a while ago I read this, but I think that was my take. Yeah.
So, well, okay, we'll leave that side of it. But in Orbital, because
no, but even if not that, what do you think about that? Yeah.
Well, it's kind of saying that punctuation is a hallmark of education alone, and that therefore a character who's not educated doesn't deserve punctuation. It's my interpretation of it. I just think, oh, come on. Punctuation.
I have to look up to see if that was the real reason. But yeah, like, I just find that, that's another thing I think I don't like about so-called literary fiction. Like, I'm guessing if we did a study, Sophie, of some of the books that have been nominated for the Pulitzer and the Booker, as opposed to commercial fiction books that you would find more like that we kind of write, friends of ours write, and that you'd find a bit. I'm guessing there'd be the Booker Pulitzer ones would have more of them would have no punctuation marks, kind of thing. It feels like it's a literary device that these certain authors use, and I just don't get it.
And I'm sure
if I take out all the punctuation from my book, Sophie, do you think that will give me the chance of winning the Booker?
Sure. But I think I'd be disappointed. You had no punctuation. Because the thing is,
The fact
punctuation.
is, I don't care about reading the book either.
And nor do I, but punctuation
Considering
comes
I'm
from
never
speech.
going to.
I think my point is punctuation comes from speech. It's not
Yeah.
inherently a construct that's been imposed on readers as something that needs to then be chucked out because it's, it's capitalistic or whatever the theory is, whatever the literary theory is. Punctuation is there to demarcate where our pauses are in speech, and it's quotation marks are
To
there to
make
show
reading
us
easier.
on the page that's what speech is. So, that's what a comma is a pause in speech. And semicolon is.
And do you think, like, in some ways, for me, like reading with punctuation, it just helps me like not even think about what I'm like. You just read that normally. You don't.
Yeah.
Whereas, and I just enjoy the story and the characters and stuff, and I'm not having to think. Oh, hang on, is that person talking or is that person? Like, and why should that be a comma? Like, I feel like it detracts from the reading experience.
And I'll say it again, punctuation is a courtesy to the reader.
Yeah.
Like that very thing you're talking about. If you have to work that hard to understand what is being said, that's not an experience you're going to want to repeat.
Yeah, definitely. I was about to say before that one of the parts I really liked was that's when I was talking about they don't talk. And for me, a novel with characters, like they do have a little bit of a few chats here and there. Like I like the talk, and it just feels like they just almost got started to talk, and then they just pull back. So like there's a chat between Nell and Sean. Here's the other guy I'm thinking
The American guy, yeah.
About religion, which I find quite interesting. That they're both, one of them saying, well, obviously I believe in God because look out there, how could you not? And the other one saying, well, I believe that there's no God because look out there, how could you think that wasn't just,
yeah.
So like, and I thought, oh, these are really interesting, like, issues, discussions to have. And then it just kind of stopped. Also, no one really asks Chi about her mum or talks. Like, these people are living together for 3 to 6 months, depending on, and they're not having any big conversations. They watch a movie at one stage. They talk about sweets and lollies, and that seems the deepest like conversation they have. About condensed milk in Russia and how Americans don't have enough condensed milk in their things. Like, and all these things are really interesting, and I just wanted more. For me, the book is 45,000 words. I think she could have done everything you're saying it was supposed to do, while also layering in some characters. But as you said, it's a different book. I just like character development. Let's face it. I want character development. I want to care about the characters, and I did not.
Well, and that's
congrats to Samantha Harvey for winning the Booker.
Yeah, and that's
when you win the Booker.
Sorry, what was that?
You get a lot of money when you win the Booker.
I don't actually know. So, but I think that's also, you should care about the characters. But I guess I didn't necessarily. Well, I cared about them in the moments when they were there, but I didn't care about them when they weren't there.
Overall, yeah. They win £50,000, so not bad. Well, I was just thinking because we mentioned a few of the other. Let's talk about prize. Unless there's anything else you want to talk about with Orbital.
Not necessarily. I'd be interested if anyone who's listening or watching has read it and would like to weigh in. By all means, please increase our algorithm discoverability by leaving us comments, and adverse or otherwise. And you can also leave us comments about punctuation. We're prepared to get into this. If we have enough of a response about punctuation, maybe we'll do a whole episode on it. Who knows?
Well, that'll be a problem because I was a terrible English teacher. I was in that era when they didn't teach grammar at school, and so I don't know anything.
Wild time that was. I learned grammar properly studying foreign languages.
That's sensible, because it's really annoying not knowing when people say things like, so maybe you have to teach me the basics of grammar. What was the thing? Dangling modifier. What is that?
I think the dangling modifiers.
I don't know any of that. They didn't teach me any of that, and I'm annoyed. I want to know all that stuff, but I just want it to be in my head. I don't actually want to be out there learning it.
You don't want to be tripping over it while you're writing novels, I think is part of it.
Yeah. Thank God for editors. So I was one thing about, obviously neither of us, I shouldn't assume that you're not, but I think from what we've discussed, I am assuming correctly that neither of us are really up on the criteria for the Booker Prize or the Pulitzer? Like, do you know much about that? Like,
No.
and the Stella, like, I think no shame on the Stella Prize. I really am happy that Sophie and I are listing, like, the Miles Franklin was the big Australian literary award, right? Sophie, and then they got
And the Miles Franklin is meant to the book is meant to illuminate an aspect of Australian life.
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And the Stella came in because they wanted to showcase more women's fiction, not women's
Yeah,
fiction.
but even at its inception,
Fiction written by women, yeah. Or not
there
just
was
fiction either, is it? It's non-fiction,
it's yeah, but what's not in there? Romance fiction.
like, does it actually say that you can't have a romance novel? I mean,
It
like,
doesn't say that, but at the time it's still, because I was somewhat involved at the very dawn of it, and there was a discussion about which novels would be allowed to be submitted for it, and it was so essentially what it has become is a version of the Miles Franklin in terms of the sorts of books that
and
turn.
was that not the intention?
I think it might have been some people's
people's
intention
intention.
originally. I think there was some consideration about whether it was open to things like romance fiction. I do have qualms about whether we can say it's really representative of women's writing when there are so many women writing romance fiction alone, shall we say.
And crime, like, you look at
Yeah.
the women in our country that write not just romance fiction, but the stuff like, so as I said, romance, crime, fantasy, a little less probably, like, but even stuff like what we call women's fiction,
Yeah.
right? So say your books, which are not strictly romance, and my, like, Patterson Girls and Work Wives and all that, they've got romantic elements often, but they're not. Like, these are books written by primarily by women, primarily for women. And yet they will never win a Stella. They will never be nominated Stella. Like,
yeah, and it's again, like you and I have had this discussion off air. We've had it on air. Neither of us is interested in prizes because
no.
that's the life of.
No, I didn't mind the
£50,000
prize win of the Booker.
Sure, like love that, but it's not like we're writing thinking, how am I going to get myself this prize? I do feel that it's yeah. I don't know that a prize for women's writing can be said to be representative of women's writing when so many books that are written by women are not eligible to be.
And to me, like, I
or
feel
if
like
they were entered, they wouldn't pay attention.
here it says the books eligible for the prize, this is a Stella, are novels of all genres, memoirs, histories, biographies, single author short story collections, verse novels, novellas, poetry. But as you said, I mean, I think not, this is getting into the all weird kind of territory in terms of saying, because I was going to say, I'm pretty sure I've had publishers enter my books for the Stella. And I remember thinking, why are you wasting your money on the entry fee? And clearly I've never been nominated, and that's fine, and maybe my books just aren't good enough, you know what I mean? Like, but I don't necessarily think that's the case, because if we look at, like, people actually enjoying them and buying them and word of mouth. But I know, like, there's sort of so for me, there's like an unwritten, I should say, criteria for the Stella.
Because also that what you just said, the whole idea of good enough, that's highly subjective, and it very, very much depends on who's judging.
Which is why I think there is an unwritten kind of criteria for these prizes, like the Booker Prize and the Miles Franklin and all that. And that's fine, because that's what they have. And we've got other prizes, like the Romance Writers Australia does. We've just started a women's fiction category for next year for the Ruby. So, that's great, because there's not a space for that.
Well, here's a good opportunity, partly to plug the RWA, of which I am not a member, so this is an unbiased plug. But if a writer wished to enter that particular category of prize with their work, I'm presuming they have to be a member of the RWA?
No, not at all. So that's the thing. The Ruby Prize is like, the Ruby is the romantic book of the year. It is like, I think all of the others, you don't have to be a member of anything to the Stella. Your publishers can enter you in. It used to change a couple of years ago where you had to do it yourself, but now the publishers can. And there's a number of categories. And this year we've added YA, and we've also added women's fiction, because there is no competition. There's competitions for crime in Australia. There's competitions for historical fiction. There's competitions for literary fiction, as we were saying. There's competitions for fantasy and stuff and children's fiction. But there's no actual competition for books like your, your books, my sort of Patterson Girls, Work Wives, all that kind of stuff. People like, off the top of my head, trying to think, Sandy Docker. I'm trying to think. I'm literally, my mind's gone back. Tess Woods, like all those type of people. There's no competition, so now there is. So the romantic book of the year, has a women's fiction element, has a YA fiction for romantic elements, and there's a whole load of other things as well. And that book, that competition is all about reader enjoyment, and basically that's the main criteria. Like, did a reader, want to stay up late reading this book, like it gripped you thing. So yeah, the spaces, I remember Di Morrissey said to me a few years ago, which I may have mentioned on here when we were talking about festivals, that literary festivals are, and I think it's changing very slowly, and some festivals are primarily focusing on more genre fiction, but like there's still certain festivals that we've talked about that we just won't get asked to. I mention any names here, but one of them has just started releasing names today, and I'm like, yeah, never gonna go there. But Di Morrissey said, like, that's not our place. Our place is with the readers, kind of in the bookshops, and I think it's the same with literary prizes, isn't it? There's a purpose for them, and a lot of these books wouldn't necessarily sell in big numbers if it weren't for them being shortlisted. Is that correct, Sophie, as a publishing?
Well, it's more as a former bookseller. I would be qualified to speak on that. I do remember a bookseller saying to me that the Miles Franklin was the kiss of death.
Ooh,
I do think that was possibly in the bookshop they were working in, and that was because that anyone who was going to buy that book would already have bought it in that particular bookshop, because we do know that the Miles Franklin can absolutely increase sales.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, definitely. And
I should also say, you mentioned fantasy awards, and that reminded me that you mentioned that Orbital was in the sci-fi fantasy section.
Yes.
Now, the reason why it should not be there is it's actually science fact.
It's true. That's why I was shocked when it was in there. I didn't say anything was a busy thing, and I don't know. Actually, let's have a look online quickly.
It's the International Space Station, which is a real thing.
Yeah, exactly. And
there's a moon landing mentioned as well.
There's no fantasy or sci-fi in it, is it? Like, it's literally, it is a fact, like it's based on very realistic things that happen.
Gravity, the movie starring Sandra Bullock and George Clooney, could be said to be science fiction.
Yeah.
But that's also based in science fact.
I was just looking on the Dimmicks website, since that's where I bought it, to see if it said where it, but it doesn't have a listing of, but I'm just checking on Amazon, because we do know that they do have categories.
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
They have their own, actually. So just so in case anyone's curious, when a book is put into a publisher's database system, there are BISAC and BIC and thema codes assigned to the book, and that is when editor or publisher or whomever just categorizes the book. And so BookScan, which covers most book sales in Australia, you can see categories assigned to books, and that will be one category of book, the primary category that's been assigned to it. But for every book, there are several codes that will give some indication of where the book belongs, like where it's classified. So that should pop up in the software that the booksellers are using, but that doesn't mean that the uni student who's shelving the books, and I was one. So
although they looked on the computer.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Because I hadn't found it in general fiction, so I asked them.
When I was the uni student shelving books, if I didn't know what the category was, I'd make it up. I'd be like, I can't tell. Well,
they were right. It was in fantasy, and they looked on the computer, which made me think that maybe Dimmicks overall has it in fantasy. But on Amazon, it says literary fiction.
Right.
And I think that's true. I would say that is what it's in.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
The next two are interesting. Psychological thrillers. Psychological fiction, maybe psychological fiction, but not I didn't feel like it was a thriller to me. Do you?
No, if someone buys it expecting a thriller, they will be disappointed.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I bought it expecting a literary novel, and I'm sorry, I'm disappointed. But you loved it, so that's good.
I loved it because I listened to the audiobook.
Yeah, exactly, and that can really make a difference. Anyway, I think we've exhausted our
Orbital, but we were talking about the rubies and festivals and things like that. So when do the entries for the rubies close?
The rubies just opened on the 2nd of December, I think, and it closes the beginning of January. So you've got a few weeks to enter, and just go to romanceaustralia.com, I think. I need to actually enter my 2 books that came out last year, so I need to get onto that.
So your publisher won't do that for you?
They probably would. It's, as I said, I'm just used to doing it because I know, like, we've emailed the publishers, and like now publishers are allowed to enter their books into it if they want to, and we had a few publisher entries last year, but yeah, I've just always done it. But yeah, you're right.
Well, because you may not need to.
True.
That's why I was asking. You may not need to. Your publisher may be doing it for you.
True. That's true. All right. Well, what apart from Orbital, have you read anything else lately?
I have been reading a book about Judith Jones, who worked in American publishing for many years.
Wow.
And so she's an editor at Knopf, and it's a book I picked up in the States when I was there. I bought it at Parnassus, Anne Patchett's bookshop, and I'd read about this book, and it's
Is it called The Editor?
Yes, it is.
Oh, yeah.
It's really, really well-written nonfiction, and Judith had such an interesting life even before she started. Well, she'd sort of done a bit of working in books. She worked at Doubleday, but then she was in Paris for a while, and she just had this whole interesting life going on. So, yeah, it's a really fascinating book. And
is there anything about her editing and, like, just any tips for writing in there, or is it just general?
No, I would, well, not that I've actually gone into the guts of her career at Knopf, but I doubt it, just because it's more about her working relationships with authors.
Okay, well, I just finished reading Same as It Ever Was by Claire Lombardo. Have you read any of her?
I haven't, but gee, that cover looks like Hello Beautiful by Anne Napolitano.
Same style. And it's a similar type of book in a way, I would say. I loved Hello Beautiful by Anne Napolitano, and I think we mentioned that last time we chatted or something. And so I think you'd probably like this too. But the most fun we ever had is her first novel. And one of my favourite authors, Ellen Hildebrand, always says that she loved that book. So I've got that book, but never got around to reading it. But then I got the new one, and I've just read this. And honestly, I just loved it so much. I could kiss it. But I'm not sure it would be everyone's cup of tea, because it is it's a long novel. I think it's like 160,000 words or something. And it's about this woman who, like, basically you see her when her child is young, and you see her when her child is now having a baby of his own, and it's about her marriage and just the doubt she has about motherhood, and like, it's just really interesting. And what I think is fascinating, is that Claire Lombardo, I think she's younger than me, and a bit younger, and she has no children. I don't think she's married. She definitely has no children, because and yet she can get in the head of someone who's been married for like 30 years and has like had really stressful births and times. I just think, like, it's a real skill of I mean, we all do this, right? We all write about characters that we don't have experience of, but hers is so well done. It makes me go, how could you know that? So,
well, probably because she's listened.
Yeah, she has. And she does a lot of character, because I listened to podcasts yesterday, like, she does a lot of pre-character work like you do, and just writes scenes from people's past and that she might never use. Like, she says it's a long book, but she overwrites like really getting to know the characters. But yeah, I absolutely loved it. It is kind of a quiet novel in that and plotless in that you just follow this person in her highs and lows. But yeah, I think I really love getting inside someone else's head and hearing what they think about their most private relationships, kind of thing. Like, because it's like she says things that people just don't say aloud necessarily. They don't want to admit certain things, like about how they feel about kids, or how they feel about their husband, or, friendships as well. Like, she talked, and when someone actually says it, I feel like that's really helps you really connect to a character.
Yeah. Well, speaking of private relationships, and this is going to be such a tawdry segue, but I am reading a spicy Christmas novel, so there you go. what I'm
What?
shifting to and
So
from.
you're getting into the Christmas spirit with festive books?
Yes, look, this is because I follow the TikTok account of a Melbourne woman called Tierney, who
Yes,
actually
we've talked
featured
about her
in an
before.
article.
Keep talking. Just get it done.
She was actually in an article in the Sydney Morning Herald, and it was probably in the Age as well, about romance novels
I saw that, yeah.
So, and I've been following Tierney for a while, and she is so good at recommending books that I got a Kindle Unlimited subscription because of her. So I could
What
actually
book is
keep up.
it that you're
So
reading?
it's by Jade West, and it's
Oh, I haven't heard that one.
the naughty list. I think it's just this.
Is it good?
Well, I've only just started, so I can't.
Okay, because I have heaps of Christmas books, but I never read them because you know what I mean. I like buy
I'm
books.
just checking if it's the naughty list. I thought there was
I
no
listened
word in there.
to while we're talking about Christmas book recommendations, I listened to the Christmas Countdown by Holly Cassidy, I think it was. Really like fun, sweet contemporary romance. But my Substack next week is all about Christmas books. These are the ones I want to read.
This one you prepared earlier. We didn't even talk about this.
I know. I just had it on the shelf because I took that photo for Substack. So
that's
I
hilarious.
am really looking forward to a few of them, particularly this one, The Most Wonderful Crime of the Year.
Ali Carter. Oh God. Okay.
Yeah,
And it's a
amazing.
hardback. Where did you get that from?
I had to buy it online because I saw it, like I heard it in a podcast or saw it something and it wasn't available in Australia. This is what I think I mentioned. Wasn't available until Australia till January.
Oh, that one. Yeah.
So anyway, I bought it. But yeah, so maybe early in the year we'll have to talk about what Christmas reads we read and if we've got any,
See, now I've got to get my skates on and come up with some more. I have in the
Well,
past.
I have heaps to recommend to you, but I never read any of them. As I said, I buy them. I don't read them. Really funny, my son works at QBD, as I've said, and they get a good discount of stuff every Christmas. They can buy quite a lot of books at a really good discount. So we all put our requests in, and his girlfriend went with him, and she came home with some books, and I was like, I've got that book already. I've got that book. She's like, I was thinking that in there, and they were Christmas ones. Like,
Right. Well, the Christmas novel has been big in the UK for a while, of course, but Benjamin Stevenson here has just brought out one. So there seem to be some.
What did you say? Who had?
Benjamin Stevenson has.
Here's another one I had earlier. That's on my list too.
And it's called Everyone This Christmas Has a Secret for those who.
I love it because it's a hardback, and I'm obsessed with hardbacks.
Oh, cute.
Yeah. And it's only a short length too. This is only about 50,000 words.
Because you don't want to be reading the blockbuster for Christmas because you may not get it finished in time. But if it's
too busy doing
slender thing, then you could start it December.
And watching Christmas movies. Do you watch Christmas movies?
I do. I have attempted to watch the new Lindsay Lohan on Netflix, but it's not as good as the previous Lindsay Lohan on Netflix.
I haven't watched any yet. I keep saying to my family, we should watch Christmas movies, and they're like 3 teenage boys and a husband who are like, no. And they are always hogging TV.
There is an amazing article. I feel like it was in New York Magazine about Christmas, about Hallmark and Christmas movies in the Christmas movie industry in the United States.
It's crazy, isn't it? I've had a couple of friends who've had novellas and romance novels made into Hallmark movies.
It's a year-round industry. It's there's a whole lot. And I've started watching a few, and it's comforting. You're just there, you're lulling yourself into the Christmas spirit. If you have,
it helps you, get in the Christmas spirit, because I feel like, you're possibly similar to me in that, like, I've got a January deadline. You have too.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to write a lot before then, and I feel like it's hard to get in the festive spirit if you don't really have time to sort of.
And I also have about 10 interviews to post before Christmas for my country.
Exactly. So I feel like, that's why I should watch some Christmas movies to get in the Christmas spirit. Yeah. Maybe that'll, help me.
Well, because the other thing is.
Also listen to some tunes.
Well, but also if you put the Christmas movie on, they can be run in the background just quietly.
Yeah, because that's
the plot arcs are fairly similar.
And if you've watched them before, you know what's going to happen basically.
So you can just have it on with there's Christmas music going. There's it's atmospheric. You can just have it playing, and if you dip it out, you'll be able to pick it up. So you can use it like a soundtrack.
That's true. Yeah. Oh well. We should probably stop talking because we're just having a conversation now, and people will be going, What's going on?
We are giving recommendations. Go and watch some
We
Christmas
did.
movies, read some Christmas books, get in the
Feel
festive.
free to recommend to us too.
Absolutely. And at the time this is posted, it's actually very close to us recording it. So these recommendations are going out into the world. And yes, if you are listening, watching, and you have some recommendations for us or for other listeners and watchers, then please leave them in the comments or send us a line and we'll put them out in some format. But Rach, this is actually our last recording for the year. We will be publishing another episode
One
after.
more. Yes.
It's our last recording for the year. So
Have a good Christmas.
I'll see you on the other side.
Definitely. All right. Bye.
Bye.